everyone, to today's Tuesday Times Roundtable. I'm going to go ahead and introduce today's moderator as we all get in and seated. Abdul Samad is a doctoral student here at FIU in SIPA, the School of International Public Affairs. He works as a research assistant in the Public Administration Department and has spent a substantial amount of time working in the nonprofit sector advising student groups, organizations, including community-based organizations, international and cultural organizations, and volunteer and debate clubs. He received a master's degree in public affairs and a certificate in organizational leadership from Western Kentucky University. He has also taught English as a second language to many international students while working on his master's of TESOL, which is teaching English to students of other languages, at Ohio Dominican University. He has his bachelor's in business administration from Muhammad Ali Jinnah University in Islamabad, Pakistan. His research interests include issues of race, religion, social equity, inequality, and cultural competence within the field of public administration. He's currently looking at the rise of Islamophobia in the United States, which is today's topic, and the role of religious leaders, community, and city officials in combating it. Abdul hopes to undertake research, teaching, and to act as a consultant to non-government and government agencies, sharing his goal of improving the quality of governance and combating prejudice. Thank you for being here today, Abdul.
All right, greetings everyone. How are you all doing today? Good? Good. Very warm welcome to all of you today here. And as Eric mentioned, the topic today is the, I did say here, rise of hate search, but it's mostly dealing with the rise of Islamophobia in the US. So he introduced me, but I would just give a different introduction of myself. Here, my name is Abdul Samad. At FIU, I'm a student. I'm a teaching assistant, research assistant. At the airport, my identity might change. I might be a random search, maybe a potential terrorist. On the news, someone with my name would be called as a jihadi or maybe affiliated to a terrorist group. So the whole idea today that my focus is not to prove you that what you think about Islam and Islamophobia in general is wrong, or not to prove someone right, but the whole idea is that there are some barriers, there are some bridges, and my whole focus is to bridge those gaps and to view the religion of Islam and Muslims from a different lens. What do you see, by the way, on the screen right now here? Anything? Okay. What do you see now? Science. Thanks, pretty much. What do you see now? It's maybe a number plate of car, maybe, right? Long time ago. So I'll come back to why I had that slide and why we jumped to the word science. But just talking a little bit about the article that I chose. I think it was published 2 years ago. And have anyone read the article, by the way? That's okay. So it talks about the rise of hate search. But what was interesting in the article by the author is he's looking at a different trend. So usually when we need to do research, we go ahead and we ask people, we do surveys and we ask, people through interviews and conduct some experiments and all that. But what he's looking at is he's looking at the Google trends and what specifically happened after the San Bernardino attack in California. Everybody remembers that? What happened? Two people with Muslim-sounding names shot approximately 22 people in one of the guys' workplace. And what we see after that is an explosion of Islamophobia. And what he looked at, that there was a rise of hate search on Google. Anything that was with the word Islam or Muslims, there were many nasty things, but most common was kill Muslims, all Muslims are terrorists, and hate Muslims and things like that. And what they really come up with the model, and they say if their model is right, they propose that there is a correlation between the hate searches and hate crimes. Right now in the US, they are like 2% of the total population, and it's a minority, but they are on the news because of the growing concerns we face different events. What happened in San Bernardino, what happened in 9/11, they were all very tragic incidents. But anyone knows what happened in Peshawar, city of Pakistan, 3 years ago in 2014? It was bombing, but it was mostly six gunmen. They entered a public school and they killed 132 school children and some of the staff members. We don't see that much on the news, apparently. In Somalia, the capital, Mogadishu, 500 people were killed in a terrorist attack. We don't hear that in the news. Maybe, on that day, but we don't get to talk about that. And most of the people, they died in Somalia, in the city of Peshawar, Pakistan, they were all Muslims. So any act of terrorism that is, perpetuated against any mankind is an act against humanity. That's the basic call. That's how things should be looked at. But with this growing rise of Islamophobia, any incident that takes place, the first thing is, okay, we just brush the whole community with just the paint that they all believe the same. So what exactly is Islamophobia? Um, let me ask you guys a quick question. So what do you guys think when you hear the word cake, for instance? Cake, like a chocolate cake. What is the first thing that comes into the minds? You like it, right? Um, blue, it's a color. What's the first thing that comes to the mind? Sky, ocean, water, right? Things like that. So, what's the first thing that comes to the mind when you hear the word Muslim? Be honest, yeah? Your friend, okay. Allah, okay. Conservative, okay. Interesting. Sorry. The Middle East. Interesting. Okay, we're going to talk about Middle East too. Okay. Um, and where does all these thoughts come from? How do we form this identity in our brains that when we hear about chocolate cake or the color blue or Muslims or Islam, what's the source that we're referring to? Where do we hear these things from, like Middle East, and do we read them in the books? The news, right? Okay. So is that a common source? Where do we learn about these things? Do we agree on that? Okay. So there has been different surveys conducted, and if you ask people that what they think about Muslims and surveys, a lot of people are very generous. They would say, okay, we think of a religion, mostly Arabs. Some people would say maybe violence. But what's the trends uh, in the Google and overall what we see in the news, that's very scary. And for a lot of Muslims, it's even worse because that's not what they think they are. and that's not what their identity is. So the common thing is when you hear about a Muslim is someone who is an Arab, a male who has 4 wives. They rode camels, live in the deserts, violent. When we talk about the Muslim women, they are oppressed. They wear the headscarf, and they are not allowed to go to school. These are like the common perceptions. And I'm not saying that all of you guys have, but this is what, when we look at the literature and when we look at the trends, what we get from the news, it all comes to that. So to define Islamophobia, a lot of people say, okay, it's a misnomer. It's not a terminology that should be used, and it's not racism. But it is an irrational fear and hatred towards Muslims. Just because the terrorist attacks that occur, and most of the time the people, they have the names, Muslim sounding names. Most of them, people say that someone looked like you, and it's very much painful when you get the Muslim perspective, because whenever something happens, on one side people demand that Muslims should come out and they should be apologetic about it, and they should raise their voices. I mean, it's good that you should interact with people, but look at that, being a Muslim, and it's been a research where they gathered the perception of the Muslims. They said we feel more pain because our identity has been hijacked, and someone is using our identity and showing the world that this is what Islam is about, and this is what the Muslims are about. This is the mainstream Muslims. I just want to show you a little clip here.
Before September 11th, I really didn't have any conception of me being different. And then it was directly after September 11th that for the first time, I felt singled out as a Muslim. Suddenly I was different.
The worst feeling in the world when we hear about something like 9/11 or San Bernardino or the Paris attacks is that somebody who identifies as Muslim committed those crimes.
Anytime ISIS has had an attack, Muslims have to go on television, have to go to their neighbors, and they have to go to their schools and explain to everyone that ISIS does not represent Islam.
It is extremely frustrating that people think that there's a link between ISIS and the Muslim faith.
It is a radical group, and they do not understand the faith and what it stands for.
If you look at Islam in our text and our doctrine, Islam is a religion of peace. There's no violence, there's no imperialism.
Even within these attacks, many Muslims died. It's not okay in any circumstance to kill innocent people. You know, ISIS does not represent the Muslim faith.
I think a lot of people assume because we're all from, one faith or one community that, everyone's the same, everyone thinks the same.
I think it's a common misconception. People assume like if you're Muslim, that means automatically you're like adhering with every little part of your faith. But it's kind of like Christianity. Not every Christian goes to church every Sunday. Not every Muslim woman decides to wear a hijab.
Muslim people, just like any type of person, we come in all shapes and sizes. We look like different things. I don't look like the traditional Muslim Arab girl.
I don't think I'm like anyone else. I certainly hope not.
And so when I see the world responding the way it does and attacking Muslims, it kind of makes me feel helpless because it's not what Islam stands for.
I'm a victim of ISIS. Not only are they hurting my people, the American people, not only are they fighting the ideals that I stand for, ideals of liberal democracy, but they're also hurting my native homeland.
All these horrible killings are not okay, and they're not reinforced by our religion.
Islamophobes or politicians who use these kinds of events and politicize them, they ostracize our community as well, and it tends to just make me feel like an outsider. Despite me being born and raised in America, sometimes it makes me feel un-American.
It's just a common stereotype that if you're a Muslim, you're not like you do not coexist with American values, and what you believe is totally different. But if you ask most Muslim Americans, they are born and raised here, they are proud Americans. They are in the U.S. Army, they are in the sports, they are the farmers, they are the merchants, and they contribute in different ways that you don't hear in the news. And most of the time, when we listen to different news channels, we don't get the representation of all Muslims, because Muslims, they are extremely diverse population in the U.S. They come from different backgrounds, different ethnicities. The only thing that I would say is common between them is the religion. So I had some biases before I came to the U.S. So I thought every single person who speaks Spanish is from Mexico, right? But that's not true. You look at the culture, it's extremely diverse. The only thing that unites them is the language. But the food is different, their color is different, the type of clothes they wear is different, family traditions, customs, and everything. And a lot of time we don't get to pay attention to that. We just conform to what we hear and what we know from the world we actually live in. So we heard, like someone said, did you say like Muslims, when you think about it, like Middle East, Arab? Okay. So what do you guys think is the majority Muslim population from? Where do most Muslims live around the world? India? Okay. Indonesia. Okay. Got it right. So if you look at um, uh, most people, and if you ask this question to an average people who is not exposed or who has not uh, done a homework or not taken any classes about religion or geography and demographics, they would definitely say that they are from Arab. So my class teacher, when I was in my master's program, she always thought I am a Christian because I told her I'm not from the Middle East. And then I told her, and she was surprised. So how can you be a Muslim if you are not an Arab? So the whole question was, if you are a Muslim, you are an Arab. But the total population of Muslims around the world, the Arabs, they constitute 12%, or approximately less than 20%, I would say. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world, followed by Pakistan, then India, Turkey, Malaysia, and then at the bottom, we look at the African countries. This is the distribution of Muslims, how they are placed around the world. So Asia, that that's the mostly dominant Muslim area. So let's talk about some of the myths. Some of them we already discussed, but they are like very common. Most Muslims are Arab. We talked about that. Strange religion and worship a God called Allah, right? So if you ask a Jew or an Arab or a Christian who lives in the Middle East, and he's an Arab too. There are many Christians and Jews in the Middle East too. And if you ask them how do they define God, they would call it Allah. It's very much surprising that a lot of people say, okay, the God they worship is something totally different. So the basic idea that most Muslims believe is in one God that they call Allah. It's okay to kill civilians in a holy war. That's called jihad. That's a very, I would say, misrepresentative word. Uh, the literal meaning of jihad is struggle. And if you struggle against yourself, against the evil, against, for me, jihad is something coming to school every day, going to classes, take care of yourself, be respectful to your parents. That's what jihad means to me. And I would say most of people, but that's how this is interpreted. Women wear veils over their faces and are treated very badly. The concept of dressing the headscarf, you will see it mostly in the Middle East. If you go to the Asian countries, if you go to Turkey, if you go to Indonesia and other countries, they don't wear headscarf most of the time. And there is no doubt that some parts women have been oppressed, but it's a choice that uh, they take for themselves. And if you ask most women, they wear headscarves in the US, they would say we wear it so that we don't feel oppressed. So they have a different definition of wearing the headscarf. And there are many myths, but I thought these are some of the common ones that they hate Americans. You see these lines by most of the politicians, most of the leaders, some technocrats and bureaucrats that some common misconceptions. But if you ask Americans, yes, they do feel isolated because of what's going on, but they are all proud Americans, like I said before, contributing in different areas. So we talked about what is Islamophobia, what is not Islamophobic, or what is not Islamophobia. Everyone has a right about anything. You all have your different views. If you have a disagreement with Islam, with Muslims, their belief, it's absolutely okay. It's not being Islamophobia. But the irrational fear, the hatred, the prejudice, the marginalization of a minority just on the basis of the stereotypes that we have, that's the notion of Islamophobia. So we talked about most of the time we hear what's going on in the news, and a lot of time I question to myself if I happen to be a non-Muslim and live in the U.S. and what I see from the news, and I take it as absolutely like true, I would be skeptical of this. I would definitely have hatred against Islam too because of what's going on. Like every month, every other week, you hear something terrible happens, and there is a Muslim sounding name that we hear, and the religion of Islam, and all that. The Pew Research Center, they did a research, and what they found out was 62% of Americans, they either don't know, would have never interacted with Islam. And when we look at the literature, what happened in the past against different minorities, what happened with the Jews, African Americans in the United States, they have gone through and still going through different parts, institutionalized racism. It's just because there is a misunderstanding, there is stereotypes, and we don't get to see the pictures of the community and have that interaction with them. So what they talk about is what can we do to fight Islamophobia, or what is the role that we can play to have people know about Islam and show the true image of Islam. There's the Council of American Islamic Relations, funny as Islamophobia. It's funny, but Islamophobia is not funny. I'll show you a little clip here.
Think your neighbor is a terrorist?
Hey, how you doing? Hey! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
Does your fear of Muslims get in the way of living a normal life?
No! He's coming!
Did you call an Uber?
We're fine.
Yeah, we'll take the next one. It's fine.
All right.
You saw the app.
I didn't know. I didn't know. It said Mo. I didn't know.
Do you judge people by their outer appearance? Introducing Islamophobia, now in an easy and convenient chewing gum. Starts working within 5 minutes to relieve bigotry and intolerance. Call your doctor if your Islamophobia worsens or you have hallucinations that discrimination isn't real. Side effects include fondness, brotherhood, acceptance, loss of bigotry, increase in rationality, and possible denouncement of superiority.
I didn't realize I had a problem, but admitting is the first step.
Islamophobia worked for me. Ask your doctor if it's right for you.
Was it kind of funny? But I mean, it just gives the reason I put that ad and showed you guys is just because there is that fear, and it's mostly because we don't have interaction with people. So what we can really do in fighting Islamophobia is most of the time we say that if someone who is at a leadership position and we hear what they say, that it is because they have some role. So right after the San Bernardino attack, President Obama, he gave a speech. And as we all know, he was a very good speaker, and still is. But what he said was, we have to fight against terrorism. There is no doubt about it. But at the same time, we have to realize that we have to have tolerance and we have to fight the irrationality of the fear. So going back to what I was talking about before, there was a rise of hate search after the San Bernardino attack. Right after President Obama made this speech and his comments, and he said, they're Muslims, they are soldiers. They're Muslims, they are athletes. And what they found in their research that the hate searches all of a sudden changed, and people started looking at Muslim athletes, Muslim soldiers, and that they were among the top searches with anything that had Muslim name or anything that had to do with Islam. 2 weeks later, President Obama gave another speech, and this time he added further that Muslim Americans are farmers, neighbors, merchants, and this is a short statement from his speech that they are our friends and our neighbors and our co-workers, our sport heroes, and yes, they are our men and women in uniform who are willing to die in defense of the country. It changed things drastically. Not to say that Islamophobia is not there anymore, but it changed the things for a while because people started looking, okay, there are Muslims. They are in the army, they are, in the sports, they are the activists, and they are doctors, engineers, and they contribute in their different ways. So that changed the narrative. So what I want to tell you is, if the best way for all of us is to interact, if you have misconceptions, ask a Muslim. I'm sure most of your friends in your class, you might have interacted with some, but learn about them. In my case, many of my misconceptions against different races, different people that I thought were different, they just went away. Everyone is racist to some extent because we have those beliefs, those ideologies within our mind. And the best thing I talk every time is, a lot of time we talk about, when we meet people, we talk about similarities, what makes us similar to each other. But I think it would be interesting if we talk about the differences. What makes you different from me? What makes me different from you? And that's where the process of learning takes place. And we are so much reluctant to talk about differences, and just because it might offend someone. But in your classrooms, your work environments, or your colleagues, I would say identify them and talk to them. And I would say interaction and integration is the best way. I will leave the floor to questions. If you guys have any questions, if not, I will start off with them. So I thought I'll just leave this part for a more open dialogue and whatever you guys think about. What you said.
They just said something about Islam being a religion of peace and yeah, I think Muslims are peaceful like in general, but like there was always that element of violence since the founding of the religion. You know, it was like you said, a struggle, and the community of Muslims they struggled to defend their faith and to grow and expand it. It was there's that component, violence also. So, like any religion,
I, I won't say Islam is the religion of peace, nor I would say it's the religion of violence. We have different interpretations. There are different texts that you read. There are some texts they would say, okay, kill the Muslims, it's absolutely justifiable, and the concept of holy war is the way we see it. But that's not the way an average Muslim sees it. It has a completely different perspective. It's just like people were oppressed in a certain society, and that's how they responded back um, to the injustices at that time. Nowhere it says that go ahead and kill the Muslims. There are like approximately 1.7 billion around the world, and if anyone believed that, the world would have been a different world the way we live in today. But I mean, you're right. Uh, it raises concerns among people, and it just makes people curious. What is wrong?
Very similar.
Right.
But why do you think it is that only in Islam there's such a large population of extremists compared to Christianity or Judaism?
So, if you look at before 9/11, that was the time when we saw that explosion of Islamophobia and also the attacks. Uh, but if you look at the world, there are different countries with mostly Muslim populated, and there are people. So most Muslims, I would say, died in these terror attacks than non-Muslims. But this is not what defines Muslim. We don't get to talk about the uh, chemists. We don't get to talk about the mathematicians. We don't get to talk about the scholars. They were all Muslims. But the environment we live in and what's going on around the world, um, unfortunately, most of the people that are doing it, they call themselves as Muslims. But as Muslims, as much as we try to detach ourselves with them, because we consider them as non-Muslims, because they do not represent what we believe. But they were attacked by different um, other groups in time, uh, and they were justified as evil at that time. Those different groups, they were considered evil. But even if you look at the percentage of the population, it's 0.000 some percentage. But they are so much visible that we just get think about whatever is happening. It's just Muslim and it's not very good.
See has anything to do with the growth of ISIS or groups like that?
So again, if you talk about it, it will go into a political discussion. But obviously, they are uneducated. So if you talk about Taliban, they were not there. They were created as a result of the American foreign policy. And before that, there was no existing Taliban. And Taliban are the one they fought against the Soviets uh, along in the line with the U.S. But then, when the war was over and They were left behind. They were not controlled. They had weapons, and they started to challenge the rate of the government. And they said, okay, and that's where this whole influence is uh, coming.
The methods you mentioned here, what are some other ways that Islamophobia can be combated in the U.S.? I'm sorry. Aside from the methods that you mentioned here, what are some other ways that Islamophobia could be fought against here?
Well, if you look at, there are uh, examples of uh, minorities being isolated from the majority in terms of Jews, in terms of blacks, in terms of other. Uh, the very basic thing is, and the main cause that people try often neglect is, it's because of the idea of we have to find some scapegoats. We live in a world, we have so much troubles. We have economic injustice, we have poverty, we have education crisis, mismanagement, misgovernment. But we have to find some scapegoats so that we can put the blame on that. Unfortunately, Muslims right now are in that area. But I think, uh, and in my personal experience so far, the best ways that you can uh, uh, have this, this you can combat this thing by having more interaction, like I discussed before, having some more platforms where people can get together in the town halls. And most of the time, when we look at the current scenario, we don't find much representation of Muslims in the local government, in the state government, in the federal government, because of the fact that they're a minority, but also because of the fear of unknown, that how would we be treated if we interact or talk to a politician or a leader around us. So I think interaction is the one thing. Talking to people, social media, having more representation in the news of people who have knowledge. Uh, Show people that they are doctors, they are soldiers, they are fighting against terrorists in the world, and all the good things that Muslims are doing. But unfortunately, what we see is the negativity.
Muslim, what should I or we have to do to remove the label of extremism?
In in your so I think most of the time when we talk about things, it's good to give some examples. So my experience is my first roommate, when he heard that I'm Muslim, we did not speak for him. Right now we are the best friends. He called his parents and his parents told him, okay, you are not safe there, you should leave that apartment. And then he started talking to me. He had a lot of questions. What's going on? What is your belief? And what do you see on the news? How is that different? So I answered all of his questions. And then he was completely okay. Another lady I met, she said, the first question, what are your thoughts about ISIS? I said, worse than what you think of them. And she said, you need to come to us. You need to talk to us. But then again, you have to be careful. This um, prevalence of Islamophobia, sometimes when you interact and you are in a position where you are not wanted, it can lead to different problems, like it happened in different town meetings and town halls. But I think the best you can do is be a role model, educate people, try to interact with people as much as you can. And I think people are there to willing to listen to you, to people. And there are some exceptional cases where Muslims are making uh, great wonders. They're doing the volunteer work. They're involved in the community-based organizations, and that's where when people see they are not just taking, they are giving back to the people. So I think that's I think what most of the Muslims should be focusing on today.
To make a comment about the point when you mentioned like Arabs are not the majority of Muslims. So for me, like because I'm from Saudi Arabia, okay. So Saudi Arabia has been known like the most conservative, like part of Islam. Also, like the population with 100% Muslims, as when I'm talking about citizens. So one of the misconceptions with a lot of people, like the culture and Islam. So our culture is different. Sometimes we do things, it's not related to Islam. It's how we raise. It's our culture. We are like, raised like conservative. Like when it comes to women being driving, that's what the community and society wants. It's not what Islam wants. And now they're like, with the modern and this like, new generation, they're asking for changing, and now the rules have been like changing. So I just want to clarify that there are some differences between culture and what Islam is.
Absolutely. That's a very good point here. And a lot of time when we say about the race, like it mentioned before, for me, everyone who spoke Spanish was from Mexico, right? That's not the case here. So there are different traditions, different cultures. Saudi Arabia is largely Muslim-dominated country. Pakistan is a largely Muslim-dominated country. But the cultures of both countries are very much different. There are some similarities, but completely different. Like here, when you greet someone, it's just like, "Are you ready?" Right? So in the Saudi culture, they start with like hit on your right cheek and then on the left cheek, right? It might sound the same, but that's what their culture is. That's not what Islam is. So when you talk about the religion and the culture, that's uh, two different things. I think that. Thank you about that.
It's more perspective than a question, but I really think that I understand. I equally don't understand Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. I'm of Jewish background, but never really practiced and was never in either of the other two or any of the other religions in the world. So I would say I really don't understand religion at all. So equally as people see, there are people who say they're Muslim that are ISIS, and there are Muslims that are doctors, and there are social justice oriented Jewish people, and there are Jewish people that go around harassing and abusing people in New York that are dressed too scantily, and there are Christians who are social justice oriented, and there are Christians that exclude and oppress people for different reasons. And I try to make sense of things like that any of the religions are a religion of peace or a religion of oppression, and for all three of those religions, I know other religions too, but we've been talking about these three, like I literally have no conception of like what makes it official. Like in the English language, we have a dictionary, we can look up what something means in a dictionary. If the same people are using the Islamic faith to justify terrorism and to justify acts of good and true of the Christian religion who is oppressing people, and also there are very social justice oriented churches. Like I don't know, like there's not one person in most religions that says this is what's going on. I know Catholicism has a pope, but it seems like now that the pope is liberal, that even a lot of Catholics don't believe that the pope can set precedent because they disagree with him. So it's just, to me, I just see it as this, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't understand religion. But to me, there's no way to really say that a religion, like you were saying, that you wouldn't say it's of peace or of war. To me, I don't know that any religion is one or the other because everyone is subscribing to different views, and it's like, to me, it's like you said you even said you wouldn't call ISIS Muslims, and I don't know, like in any of those groups, like how do you say who is or who isn't? Is it just it's like an FIU club, you say you're in it, you're in it, and it's just all kind of wild to me, but in a way where it's hard for me to describe any stereotype to religion because I don't understand it, who's running it, how you join one. I wouldn't know how to join any of those religions if I wanted to. I don't know if you have to sign something, I don't get it. And I don't really want to some degree. But
it's very interesting. And when we see countries, including Muslim countries, in Iran, particularly I was talking about, right, there is an increasing number of people there backing up from the religion. They're not liking that concept of religion because religion is something that, okay, that comes from the book, right? We follow what the book says, and then how we interpret it, what was things like before and what things are like today. The problem here is, and that's what my understanding that Bilal said, and as I see in different places is, religion has been used for our own very purpose. So, for instance, we talk about slavery in the U.S. Everyone knows about Emancipation Proclamation, right? At that time, majority of the U.S. population is Christian, right? And slavery was a norm. There was there was a war that was fought because people were against that we could not, you know, abolish slavery. So should we guess that most Christians believe that it's okay to have slaves? It's okay to have oppression? Does that mean what Christianity is all about? If you ask a common Christian right now, he would say no, not at all, right? I don't think that's what. But at that time, that's what people were told. That's what God says in the book, that there are slaves and it's okay to oppress, and that's what the norm was. So I think we are different in our own ways, and the culture, the context, that plays a very important role in how we view the religion and how we view God as an entity. So it's a very good point, I guess.
Windows right outside of it, the anti-abortion demonstrations going on. I mean, that's affiliated with Christianity, so they're using Christianity, all of that, those posters that don't know what they're,
Yeah, I was walking with my professor, and she said I would like to say more posters that says control the gun laws and all that. And
I think that point gets to what groups are better organized.
Right.
Anyone is allowed to reserve that space and do that there, whether you have any affiliation with FIU or not. And if this group is doing that and the causes you're interested in are not doing that, then that is a cause for organization, because there's nothing on FIU then that is deciding what imagery is out there. People including that are not the causes.
and oftentimes we see, and oftentimes what we see, what happened in California, the guy who shot, I guess, 70 people. He had like that big rifle. I don't remember exactly how that took place. And it was going back to recently what happened in the school. Terrible, very very bad. But would things be different if that was done by a Muslim, right? And even you mentioned about the religion. Uh, Muslims are facing an unprecedented level of hate crimes, but the Jews, they have been the victim of hate crimes even more than Muslims, and this thing is reflecting that. So in different times and contexts, we have different scapegoats to label as evil, and we demonize them. And the whole notion is that we get into that trap, and without even knowing those persons face to face or interacting with them, we just form those conceptions about them. And that takes me back to the first slide I showed you guys. That was about science, right? Everyone said it's science, but that was not science, right? So if someone is driving a car and he happens to be a Muslim, let's say I have a Toyota that drives and I just go about and hit everyone there. So would that be fair to say that everyone who drives a Toyota is a terrorist? Or it's just me as an individual who did that act, right? So we don't make that distinction. It's just gets very obvious, and I think that creates more barriers for people to get what the reality is. Any thoughts or comments or suggestions? I think we should have like 5 7 minutes.
Yeah, towards the end of it, we were talking about how more people in political power should have a bigger platform to speak and to defend. An issue that occurred last year was the famous knee that Colin Kaepernick, a football player, took. Okay. And the media kind of misrepresented his message. He it towards kind of against the flag, and really his message was towards law enforcement and some of the things that have been going on last year. And I think Muslims are really missing kind of a medical figure because a lot of celebrities, LeBron James, a lot of other athletes, singers, they really defended not just him as an individual, but his right to not do anything illegal in any way, but to speak on his opinion. And I feel like the community really would need that, you know. In a day and age where social media controls so much, and you clearly were making that you benefit a lot from the bigger platforms and what they can use to help and to send out messages.
It's a very good point, and a lot of times when we see in the news, it said about LeBron James and like stars, Muhammad Ali, the famous boxer, he was a Muslim, and a lot of times people try to say, okay, how we're Muslims, Muslims are, you know, this is a different side of Muslims too, but we don't get to hear the voices of those Muslims. That's the problem here. We don't hear from the doctors. They're saving the lives of people in the community. Nobody would know that the guy who built the skyscrapers was also a Muslim, right? The, George Washington, uh, he had he his one of his pictures, he was holding the book of Quran with the founding fathers of US. So we don't get to talk about or even hear about those things because it's just one biased thing. Okay, this is what we have defined a race, a community, and then it's just about it's easy to put the blame and view them as a problem instead of focusing on the real problem. So, no more questions? Okay, I just have a small quiz for you all, and I think that you got the quiz. Yes. It's all. I thank you all very much for coming, and it was great to talk to you all. Thank you very much.